Well, today, I'm incredibly pleased to introduce iMac.
The Macintosh in person.
The iPad.
iPhone.
At the iPod Nano.
The MacBook Pro.
If today the computer and the smartphone are man's best friends and no longer the dog, if the way we listen to music has changed, if mobile phone has become a handyman, much of the credit goes to him, of a brilliant and irascible Californian who was inspired by Bob Dylan and Picasso. He's Steve Jobs, the inventor of Apple, a college dropout who built a multi-trillion dollars company. Great successes, resounding failures, and extraordinary resurrections. A childhood as an adopted child, a turbulent youth as a hippie, a career as a visionary and innovator. The same qualities that led to his premature death in 2011 at just 56 years old. At 21, he founded the largest company in the world to date. At 23, he was already a millionaire, and at 25, he was worth $250 million. He is also responsible for a real revolution in cinema, as he founded Pixar and forever changed the world of 3D animation. This is the untold story of the greatest genius of our time, Steve Jobs. Stephen Paul Jobs was born in San Francisco, the 24th of February 1955. His father was a Syrian student, Abdul Fattah John Jandali, who would later become a professor of political science. His German-American mother, Joan Carroll, barely 20, afraid of being disinherited by her father, decides to give her son up for adoption, as long as the adoptive parents would send him to college. Joan graduates come forward, promising to send Steve to college. And 17 years later, I went there, Jobs said. The family's house had a garage where his father Paul, a mechanic, could work on his cars. He marked off one section of a table and told Steve it now was his workbench. Steve wasn't really interested in cars, but he liked spending time with his dad watching him. He admired his dad's attention to details because he loved doing things right. He even cared about the look of the parts you couldn't see, and this philosophy would mark the success of Apple in the following years. Growing up, Steve started working on a project of his own. He wanted to build a frequency counter to measure the rate of pulses in an electronic signal. He didn't have all the parts he needed, so he looked in the phone book for Bill Hewlett, the head of Hewlett-Packard, and called him at home. Not only did he get the parts he needed, but Bill also gave him a summer job in a factory that made frequency counters. As years went by, Steve Jobs decided to enroll in Reed College in Oregon, but he soon realized that those courses weren't all that interesting, and that college life was too expensive for the family. So he began to rely on two advisors which would never leave him: curiosity and intuition. He decided to give up the official courses and take only those that interested him, like the one of calligraphy, where he learned everything about writing, letters and characters. This knowledge would be the basis many years later of the typographic skills of the Macintosh, the first computer for everyone and not just for geeks. After leaving his studies, Jobs lived a wild period between trips in India in search of himself and the condition of a young man without a dollar, forced to sleep on the floor of his friends' bedrooms. He said he would bring the empty Coca-Cola bottles back to the vendor for the 5 cents deposit, but despite the difficulties, Steve will remember those years as the most important for his career. It was while he was still in high school that Steve Jobs met his future business partner, Steve Wozniak, who was 5 years older and highly adept with electronics. We are at the beginning of 1974, and Jobs works as a video game designer at Atari, a pioneer company in the creation of games, while Wozniak is at Hewlett-Packard. They decide to go on their own, and with a starting capital of $1,300 they get from the sale of a Volkswagen van and a calculator, together they build the first computer prototype, the Apple I, and on April 1st, 1976, they founded Apple. Very soon after, Steve Jobs arranged to sell 50 completely built computers to a computer store in Mountain View at $500 each. Not bad for his first deal. Their first creation was a computer made up of few components, therefore quite cheap. It had some innovative features for the time. First of all, it could be connected to a television. Plus, it had a memory system that made it easier to switch on, a critical phase for computers at the time. But, on the other hand, aesthetics and design would arrive in the future. In the wake of early successes, Steve Jobs' shares took off. The company began to grow and he gave an even stronger imprint to his products. Apple II arrived, the first computer done and finished. He was already able to understand what the end user wanted, and thanks to his product, the turnover grew dramatically. In just 3 years, annual sales grew from $775,000 to $120 million, making both Jobs and Wozniak well over millionaires. In December 1979, he had an important meeting. He visited a research center of the computer company Xerox, where they were studying a system that would allow the user to control computers through simple menu icons. It was the turning point. It is thanks to this idea that Jobs and his team succeeded in transforming the computer into an appliance within the reach of even less experienced users. With this vision in mind, in 1981 he started working on the Macintosh, the successor of the Apple Lisa. The metamorphosis was completed and Jobs introduced the Macintosh computer on January 24, 1984. This was the first mass-market personal computer featuring an integral graphical user interface, as well as with the keyboard and with a new and curious device that was renamed Mouse, the first ever mass computer with these features. To dedicate 100% on this project, the year before, Jobs lured John Scully away from Pepsi Cola to serve as Apple CEO, asking, "Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world?" At first, Macintosh was a success, but already in the second half of 1984, sales dropped, and by early 1985, the Macintosh failure to defeat the IBM PC became clear. That's when the relationship with Apple started cracking. After continuous conflicts with the administrator of the time, in 1985, Jobs was forced to pack his bags. He who had created that reality in the garage and made a company of $2 billion and 4,000 employees was thrown out because it was considered unproductive and out of control. Jobs went on a new adventure, taking some of the best employees of Apple and founded a new company, Next, with a $7 million initial investment, with the idea of making state-of-the-art computers. These products had relatively limited sales, with only about 50,000 units shipped in total, but their object-oriented programming and graphical user interfaces were trendsetters of computer innovation and highly influential in their area. In addition, he helped to develop the visual effects industry when he founded the computer graphics division of Lucasfilm in 1986. The new company was Pixar, which produced the first 3D computer animated film Toy Story in 1995, made entirely with digital animation systems, an incredible success, the first of what would soon become Hollywood's greatest animation studio, producing over 20 movies since. Jobs never gave up and convinced Apple to choose a revolutionary program developed by Next as the basis for the new computers, iMacs. Not only that, Apple bought Next itself for almost $500 million, and in 1996, Steve Jobs returned home as number one. At this point, he had the eyes of the world on himself. Everyone had noticed his enormous talent and his vision, making clear that he was changing the world and everyone's life. Back at the helm of Apple, Jobs found himself facing a deep financial crisis, and Steve started firing those employees he didn't need. Because if Jobs is famous for his dazzling intuitions, it's also true that he has a difficult character, to say the least, fussy and self-centered. But since his return, Mr. Apple hasn't missed a beat. In October 2001, he presents the iPod,
right
the
there.
portable music player that has become a cult object among young and old, ordinary people and celebrities. A couple of years later comes iTunes, the virtual store where you can buy records and the songs are downloadable for free and legally. This was a real revolution in the music space and a resounding success, resulting in over 10 billion downloaded songs in 2010. In 2007, he unveiled the iPhone to the public, a minimalist design mobile phone without keyboard but with a new technology designed and created by Apple itself, the touchscreen, alongside with musical capabilities and the possibility to browse the web like a personal computer. Those presentations were real cult events, partly for his language and his mimicry, partially for his fake casual look, all studied at the table. In the launch day, 500,000 iPhones were sold, and so far more than 2 billion iPhones have been sold since production began, a massive success. Another huge success signed by Jobs is the iPod, a tablet whose user interface is built around the device multi-touch screen that sold hundreds of millions of copies. All these successes, unfortunately, led to the unexpected one morning in 2004. Mr. Apple found out he had pancreatic cancer. At first, he was told that his life expectancy was only 3 or 4 months. Analyzed the cells in his pancreas, they discovered that it was a very rare cancer, but it could be cured with an operation. Having escaped the danger, as we know, Jobs dived back into business, bringing out revolutionary products on the market. But in January of 2011, Jobs announced that he would be taking medical leave, generating a new round of speculation about his health. And in August of the same year, he announced that he would be stepping down as the CEO of Apple. And on the 5th of October 2011, Steve Jobs, the great genius, a visionary, and last but not least a father, passed away. That was the story of a man that changed the world simply following his dream and his beliefs, facing everything life put in front of him and never giving up. A true example for our lives.